All right, today we're going to talk about composite functions. And we're going to say composite functions are a function that is inside of another function. Composite functions, like a combination of functions. You may see this notation. F. Now, this is like a small circle. It's open, it's not closed. And we would read this f of g of x. All right, composite function, f of g of x. This composite function has two parts. It has this part right here that is called the inner function. And then this part, which we're going to call the outer function. All right, so it's a combination of two functions. It's got an inner function and an outer function. And the way, or in order, to evaluate the composite function, first evaluate the inner function, then use that value as input for the outer function. All right, so we got composite functions. It's a function inside of another function. We've got an inner function and an outer function. And then if we're evaluating a composite function, we're going to evaluate the inner function first, all right, the g of x in this case. That will give you a numeric value or an expression. Then you take that value or expression and you use it as your input for the outer function. All right, and let me show you what I mean using some actual numbers now. So we're going to let f of x be equal to x minus 5. And g of x is equal to x squared. Question is, what is the function of g of f of -3? G of f of -3. So again, here's your inner function. So we're going to take the f of x function, and where there's an x, we're going to put a -3. All right? So our f of -3 is equal to -3 minus 5, which is equal to -8. Then we're going to take the outer function, which is the g of, all right? And in this g of x function, where there's an x, we're going to put this function of x. So we evaluate the inner function. Whatever that value is, we input it into the outside function. So now we're looking for -8 squared. All right, so this whole thing over here is g of f of -3 ends up being -8 squared, which is 64. Make any sense? A little bit, I hope. All right, so let's evaluate f of g of -3. So f of g of -3, the first thing we would do would be evaluate g of -3, or g of x, when x is equal to -3. So this function of -3 is equal to -3 squared, which is 9. Now we evaluate f of x for our x minus 5, but we're using this 9 as our input. So since g of -3 is equal to 9, our function here is going to be 9 minus 5. And 9 minus 5 is equal to 4. All right, let's do a couple more of these. Let's let f of x be equal to 3x and g of x equal to x minus 5. And then let's evaluate f of g of 2. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is take this inner function, our g of x, we're going to substitute a 2. All right, so our g of 2 is equal to 2 minus 5, which is negative 3. So now this negative 3 becomes the input for this function. So our f of g of 2 is equal to 3 times negative 3, which is negative 9. And then let's just switch that up, and we'll go g of f of 4. So again, we evaluate this inner function first. So our function of 4 is going to be equal to our f of x function, which is 3 times your input, so 3 times 4, which is 12. And then we evaluate our outer function using x minus 5, but our input now is going to be this 12. So we just go 12 minus 5, and that's equal to 7. All right, so not difficult math, but it's important that you stay organized. All right, stay organized. Evaluate the inner function, and then evaluate the outer function. Does anybody have any questions? All right, your practice for today is going to be on page 402. (27 to 32). And then 36 through 41. And do it on a clean piece of paper with your name on it, because it's going to go in the basket at the end of the period. It's going in the basket at the end of the period.